April 2006. A thick fog blanketed the abandoned Pier 70 harbor area, where old warehouses lay dormant along the San Francisco Bay shoreline. The flashlight beams from the cold case unit's investigation team cut through the heavy dust, illuminating the cracked concrete floor behind Building 3, the spot where radar had detected something unusual. Central, call forensics to the scene. "We might have found something," Captain Michael Harris's voice echoed over the radio, low and steady. What had started as a routine inspection during the redevelopment of the old industrial zone had now turned into something entirely different. Something just uncovered could answer the question that had haunted San Francisco for nearly 60 years. What had really happened to Eleanor Shaw? That name had once splashed across front pages in the spring of 1947. A 31-year-old secretary vanished after leaving her small apartment on Powell Street to meet someone for the last time. The next day, the coffee on the table had gone cold, the bed untouched, and the whole city was left with one unanswered question. The search dragged on for months, from North Beach to Pier 70, before the case was quietly closed. The rooming house where she was last seen, room 15 at the Sportsman's Lounge, was bricked up and forgotten along with the passage of time. For nearly 6 decades, Eleanor's disappearance was just a whisper amid the fog, a mystery buried deep alongside the city's concrete layers. But now, amid the redevelopment site, as the cracked concrete split open and the smell of rust mixed with salty sea air wafted through, the investigation team had found the first signs of the truth: a rusted steel bar, a handkerchief embroidered with ES, and a decayed notebook hidden in an old wall cavity. No one expected these items to trigger a shocking chain of events, reopening the coldest case in San Francisco Police Department history. Before diving into this earth-shattering story, take a second to hit subscribe and like this video. Your support helps us bring forgotten cases like Eleanor Shaw's back into the light, stories where time, memory, and justice collide in the heart of America. The discovery at Pier 70 wasn't just the end of a disappearance. It was the first domino in a chain of events that exposed secrets spanning decades, buried right in the midst of Fog City, where the mist doesn't just obscure the streets, but also conceals human sins. Because when the police finally identified the suspects and made the arrests in 2006, it wasn't a stranger or a vagrant criminal, but 2 people who had lived in this community for half a century, familiar faces carrying San Francisco's most horrific secret. The Eleanor Shaw case wasn't just a solved mystery, it was a reminder of memory, perseverance, and justice. It might come late, but it never truly fades. San Francisco, spring 1947. The city still bore the scars of war: peeling painted walls, hills slick with fog, and cable car lights blurring in the salty sea mist. On Powell Street, the metallic grind on the tracks rang steadily, carrying the scent of ozone electricity and evening coffee from a small shop at the corner of Mason. Row houses of wood stood side by side, shadows stretching long on the walls, fading into the damp haze from the bay. On the 3rd floor of an old building, Eleanor Shaw, 28 years old, secretary for Pacific and Western Shipping, was adjusting her collar in front of the mirror. Her room was as neat as the habits of someone living alone, an alarm clock ticking precisely on the minute, a blooming orchid in a pot, a few work ledgers stacked beside the Remington typewriter. She wore a deep blue dress, draped a thin coat over it, carefully fastening the last button before pausing at the door. In those brief seconds, she glanced down at the steaming coffee cup on the table, then turned off the light. The neighbor across the hall, an elderly widow, later recounted hearing Eleanor's heels clicking on the wooden floor, followed by the door closing so softly it was almost just a breath. No one knew where she was going. Meeting someone for the last time, those were her last words to a coworker that afternoon. Outside, the cable car rumbled through Union Square, the red neon glow from a bar reflecting off her building's wall, smearing into thin streaks of blood in the fog. That night, the city swallowed her in silence. The next morning, the janitor was surprised to find Eleanor's mailbox overflowing, the door still locked from the outside. Inside, the space was eerily still, the coffee cup cold, the bed untouched, her coat hanging behind the door, her purse neatly placed on the chair. No signs of a struggle, no strange footprints, just absolute absence. Dim light filtered through the curtains, falling on the calendar on the wall. Saturday, May 17th, frozen there. At noon, a coworker from the office came looking, calling her name several times with no response. The door was locked, but the key was still in the lock. Worried, her friend dashed down the street to a payphone and called Eleanor's family in Oakland. An hour later, when Eleanor's parents arrived, the room was intact as if time had stopped. Her father stood in the middle of the small living room, looking around before saying softly, "She wouldn't leave without saying a word like that." And as the sun dipped behind the Bay Bridge, he picked up the phone and dialed the Powell Street precinct. On the other end, the desk sergeant repeated slowly, "Missing person report, female 28, last seen leaving her apartment last night." He nodded, saying nothing more. When her father hung up the receiver, outside the window, the fog hadn't lifted. He stood motionless for a long time, listening to the cable car's clang rolling down Powell Hill, and knew his daughter had truly vanished. An hour later, the first two officers arrived. They climbed the slick wooden stairs, the musty smell hanging in the air, their footsteps echoing in the hallway. Her father opened the door with the key still in the lock. The room was exactly as it had been the night before. The cold coffee cup, the coat still hanging in place, the window cracked open to let in the fog. No signs of robbery, nothing disturbed, just a strange silence, so profound that all three spoke in whispers, as if afraid to break it. One officer circled the room, gently lifting the curtain to peer out the window. Powell Street was shrouded in fog, the lampposts standing like ghosts in a white sea. They began tracing Eleanor's possible path backward. At the bakery down the street, the owner remembered the young woman stopping by yesterday morning for 2 loaves of bread and mentioning she'd be working late. A cable car conductor recalled seeing her leave the building around 9 that evening, in a blue dress, small purse in hand, heading toward Mason. But after that, no one had seen her. On the damp sidewalks, the faint scent of sea salt lingered, the heavy dew soaking the collars of those searching. They called her name at a few intersections, questioned every late-night shop open, but got only shakes of the head. A few said they'd seen a woman resembling Eleanor sitting in the Sportsman's Lounge in North Beach the night before, with a man wearing a navy hat. By noon, as a weak sun filtered through the Bay Bridge, her father and a middle-aged officer headed to North Beach. Columbus Street was noisy in the daytime, but in the fog, it took on a shadowy quality, as if it didn't belong to the same city. The Sportsman's Lounge was in an old brick building, its neon sign flickering with broken letters. Inside, the smell of liquor, cigarettes, and old swing music mingled. The owner, Christina Arroyo, wore a black dress, cigarette in hand, looking up as they entered. When Eleanor's name came up, she paused briefly before forcing a stiff smile. She came here sometimes, polite, quiet, but not last night. A waiter nearby whispered, "She was here, sat with Jack, the ex-sailor. I saw them arguing, but didn't catch what about." Christina shot him a quick glance, then turned to the officer. "It's noisy every night here, you know. Could be mistaken identity." Outside, the fog thickened again. Her father stood by the window, looking out at the narrow alley behind the bar, where yellow light spilled onto puddles. He asked softly, "Is there a way out back?" Christina replied quickly, "Just the fire escape, sealed off long ago." The officer stared at her for a long moment before nodding. They left the bar and headed down the hill to the docks. Everything was shrouded in mist and the distant wail of ship horns. Posters on telephone poles were smeared, bits of trash swirling around their feet. Her father looked around, saying firmly, "She couldn't just vanish like this. Someone knows what happened." By late afternoon, news of the disappearance had spread through Powell and North Beach. People began whispering, the shipping company's secretary vanished into the fog. An evening paper ran a small item on the back page, amid laundry ads and cable car tickets. Eleanor Shaw, 28, reported missing. Last seen in North Beach area. Police urge public to provide information. The accompanying small portrait was a company ID photo, bright face, slight smile, eyes looking straight ahead. That night, when her father returned to his daughter's apartment, the street lights outside blurred into golden halos. He opened the door, stepping into the cold room, the lingering coffee smell from the day before still in the air. On the table, the newspaper with the missing person story lay beside the coffee cup. He gently placed his hand on her coat, as if hoping some warmth still lingered there. From the hallway outside, the cable car's rumble rose and faded into the fog. The whole city seemed to hold its breath. And in that prolonged silence, only one truth hung in the air that everyone felt. Eleanor Shaw had left that apartment, stepped into San Francisco's fog, and never returned. 2 days after Eleanor's disappearance hit the papers, the fog still cloaked the city, so thick that the row houses on Telegraph Hill seemed to dissolve into the milky white. On Tuesday morning, as the Sportsman's Lounge had just opened, the owner, Christina Arroyo, called the precinct. Her voice was low, trying to stay calm but trembling slightly. "I think you should come see this. There's a smell, something really odd." From the rooms in the back, as the two officers stepped through the narrow hallway, a sharp vinegar stench hit them, mixing with soap and fresh paint. Damp walls, the ceiling bulb casting a weak yellow glow, making the space feel veiled in haze. Christina led the way, keys in hand, stopping at door number 15. "This room's for short-term rentals, but no one's cleaned it since yesterday," she said, her voice dropping low. As the lock turned, a cold draft rushed out. Inside, the chemical smell was so heavy they had to cover their noses. The floor was carpeted anew, dark brown, still carrying the damp wool scent. A small window opened to the back alley, the curtains recently replaced, cheap ones, stiff with starch. The young officer knelt, using his pen tip to lift an edge of the carpet. Underneath, a dark stain spread, dried as if wiped multiple times. "Could be wine," Christina said quickly. But the other didn't respond, his eyes fixed on the wall near the sink. Small brown specks splattered, forming a streak about 3 handspans long. He wiped at it with a white cloth, a metallic tang wafting up. In the corner of the room, a wooden cane lay broken in two, the handle end clinging to thin fabric threads, as if wrapped around during impact. By the window, the steel curtain rod was slightly bent, the tip scratched, and on it was a patch of deeper brown against the surrounding paint. They exchanged looks, saying nothing, just listening to the ceiling fans creak and the vinegar smell growing stronger. Christina hovered near the door, clutching her pearl necklace tightly. "I told the cleaning staff to handle it," she said. "They must have used bleach." A waiter in the hallway chimed in. "The carpet was replaced last night. I heard Mrs. Arroyo say there was a wine spill, had to swap it out fast." Christina whipped around, her eyes flashing sternly for a moment. "I don't want guests complaining about smells," she said, forcing calm, but her hands shook visibly. They opened the closet, empty inside, just a few rusty hangers. On the shelf, a light circular mark showed where something had sat there for a long time and been recently moved. The bathroom door was ajar, dampness and chlorine wafting out. In the sink, the porcelain enamel was mottled, dark streaks around the rim like water mixed with iron rust. One officer leaned down, gently scraping with his nail. The dried residue flaked off, revealing white underneath. He looked up, voice hoarse. "This isn't wine." The room fell so quiet, you could hear the fog pattering against the window. At the bed's corner, a neatly folded sheet, but the lower edge stuck with a strange reddish-brown patch, darkened with age. They bagged it, along with the broken cane and curtain rod. All three scanned the room one last time. Everything felt hastily rearranged, neat to an unnatural degree. New carpet, new curtains, no dust, no human scent, just the acrid mix of bleach and vinegar, stinging the eyes. As they stepped out, the young officer paused at the door, asking, "Who has keys to this room?" Christina replied curtly, Just me and the cleaning staff. The blonde waitress standing nearby shook her head. I've never been in here. The night before last, I heard a loud thud, but thought a guest dropped something. Christina turned away, taking a long drag on her cigarette. They left as dusk fell, fog rolling in from the bay, veiling the streetlights. Behind them, room 15's door locked with a dry click in the damp chill. Outside, another bar played swing music, saxophone notes drifting into the alley, mingling with the cable car's grind on the rails. The two men walked in silence, the vinegar smell clinging to their clothes. That night, on the way back to the precinct, the older officer said quietly, "Did you notice anything off about that woman?" "Yeah," the other replied, eyes fixed on the fogged windshield. "It's not the chemicals that bother me, it's the way she talks, like she's hiding something." They said no more. At the Embarcadero, a foghorn wailed, long and low, like the sigh of a sleeping city. In the mist, lights from the distant precinct glowed faintly against the murky sky, weak as the slow pulse of something yet to take shape. Room 15, where the vinegar smell still lingered, stood quietly sealed, and in that city, for the first time, someone suspected Eleanor Shaw's disappearance wasn't so simple. The next morning, with the fog still thick on the streets, the two officers returned to the Sportsman's Lounge. They wanted to question Jack Abelson again, the name that came up most from the staff. Jack arrived, looking weary, shirt rumpled, faint booze scent clinging to him. He sat at the table by the window where Eleanor had been, hands clasped tight, as if to hide something. The older officer asked, "Did you know Eleanor Shaw?" Jack nodded slightly, eyes averted. "Yeah, we knew each other for a while." He spoke low, steady. "She left me that night. We argued, then she walked out. I figured she just needed a few days to cool off." "What was the argument about?" "Nothing big. She wanted me to quit drinking. I told her to drop it." Jack paused, taking a drag on his cigarette, white smoke curling in the humid air. "I left the bar first. When I came back looking, she was gone." He recounted wandering the docks for a bit before heading home, seeing no one. His words flowed smoothly, but each detail had gaps. When asked if he'd returned to the bar, Jack said, "No, I didn't want to see her that mad." They left Jack to confront Christina Arroyo. The owner stood behind the bar, hands scented with heavy perfume, eyes wary. When questioned, she gave a faint smile. "Yes, Eleanor was here that night, but she was drunk. I told Jack to take her home, but he left first. She sat alone a bit, then went out, maybe caught a cab. I didn't notice." She spoke evenly, a touch too fast, like reciting a rehearsed story. One officer glanced around the bar, the yellow light glinting off empty glasses. "Do you remember which way she went?" "The front door," Christina replied, without hesitation. But when they asked the cleaning staff, the blonde waitress nearby told a different tale. "I heard arguing out back, near the rooming house. Then a heavy thud, like metal, followed by running water. Really strong, probably from the bathroom." She glanced timidly at Christina, voice trailing off. "I was gonna knock, but the boss said, 'Leave it.' Guest was cleaning up." The officers exchanged silent looks. In their minds, room 15 was still vivid, as if they'd just left it. The vinegar smell, damp walls, brown streaks on the curtain. They turned to Christina, asking, "Did anyone rent room 15 that night?" She gave a thin smile, answering immediately, "No, it was empty. I had it cleaned the next day." The young officer pressed, "Why replace the whole carpet and curtains if it was empty?" Christina faltered, her smile freezing for a split second. "They were old. I wanted to freshen up the place." The reply was slick but cold, like the faint clink of glasses in the quiet air. That afternoon, the police made one last push, tracking Jack to his flophouse near Hunter's Point. His room was littered with empty bottles, smelling of cigarettes and machine oil. When asked about Christina, Jack just smirked. "She's a busybody, likes sticking her nose in." Then he added, voice lowering, "I told you, she walked out on her own. Eleanor was tired of me, and I was of her. She wanted to leave the city." The words sounded pre-chosen, devoid of emotion. That night, wind from the bay blew hard, carrying a sharp, salty chill. At his desk in the precinct, Lieutenant Calloway lit a cigarette, staring at Eleanor's photo before him. Her face in the ID shot was bright, eyes calm. He thought of the chemical smell in room 15, the unanalyzed brown streaks, and the repeated statements from the two, like they'd coordinated beforehand. She was drunk, then left. Both said in the same way, same rhythm. Too neat to be true. The next morning, they went back to the Sportsman's Lounge once more. The fog lingered thick, light dim through the flickering neon sign. The blonde waitress was gone. Christina stood at the bar. "Kurt, I've told you everything. You're scaring off my customers." They left the bar, feeling like they'd walked off a stage where every line was scripted. On the way to the Embarcadero, they paused at an intersection overlooking the bay. Waves lapped gently, seagulls wheeling through the gray mist. The young officer spoke up. "If she died in that room." The other cut him off. "No body, no crime. We've got vinegar smells and a few odd statements." He flicked his cigarette butt into the water. It sparked briefly, then went out. "But that smell," he said quietly, "it's gonna stick with me for a while." The case was officially logged as a missing person. Eleanor's family waited in vain. The local paper ran one more item, just a few lines on the back page. No new leads in Eleanor Shaw disappearance. Police continue investigation, and that was it. San Francisco returned to its daily rhythm. Ship horns, cable cars, footsteps on the streets. But somewhere, amid the damp alleys and thick fog, a small room, room 15, silently held onto its pungent vinegar scent and unexplained dark brown stains. The fog hadn't lifted when the first search team was dispatched to the bayfront. Rumors of the young secretary's disappearance had spread through North Beach, making early morning fishermen at Pier 70 crane their necks at the line of police cars parked along the docks. Waves slapped against hulls, diesel and rotting fish smells blending in the dense mist, so thick visibility was just a few feet ahead. Lieutenant Calloway tugged his coat collar, eyeing the oily water on the wooden planks. "If they brought her out here," he said softly, "they must have been in a hurry." Dock workers who knew Eleanor, she'd come by a few times to deliver shipping docks for the company, hadn't seen her since Saturday night. A skinny man with salt and pepper stubble vaguely recalled. A black Packard pulled up to the pier at dawn. Lights off, engine running. Thought it was port business. When pressed if he'd seen anyone exit, he just shook his head. Fog was too thick. I only heard a car door slam hard. From morning to noon, the search team fanned out along the Embarcadero, Pier 70, Hunter's Point route. Iron hooks, flashlights and dragnets were lowered into the dark water, hauling up floating debris, an old wooden crate, bits of cloth, sodden newspapers. As the faint final sunlight pierced the fog, an officer called out loudly. Near the south seawall, where eddies swirled between two wooden pilings, something snagged on drifting trash. He leaned down, prodding gently with a pole, and a beige leather glove bobbed to the surface. Small, feminine, the cuff embroidered with ES in silver thread. Eleanor's father was brought to the pier that afternoon for identification. He stood silently gazing at the glove laid on a wet cloth, eyes vacant. "It's hers," he said softly. "I gave it to her for Christmas last year." Beside him, the young officer held an ID card found nearby, damp paper, corner torn, but the name Eleanor M. Shaw still legible. A few letters smudged, edges worn, as if soaked for hours. The team fell silent. A distant tugboat horn echoed, slow and mournful. On the water's surface, fog rolled in layers like it was hiding something. Lieutenant Calloway signaled to pack up, but before leaving, he scanned the pier, empty crates, dangling cables, fresh tire tracks imprinted in the mud, as if someone had stopped there not long ago. "If they dumped her here," he said, "the current would have taken the rest." The next day, they sent the glove and ID card to the forensics lab. Under the white lights, the forensic technician examined each thread with a magnifying glass. The darkened leather at the cuff wasn't blood, just machine oil, likely from when it fell into the water. The serial number etched on the inside matched an order from Bernard's Leather Goods, where Eleanor had shopped. It all checked out, except for one thing. No signs of violence, no cuts, no blood. Everything stopped at lost item. Meanwhile, Cristina Arroyo sealed off the rooming house behind the bar. She told the staff that the police had stirred up trouble, and no one mentions that girl again. The blonde waitress, the one who'd heard the noises that night, took a few days off, then vanished from North Beach. Jack Abelson stopped coming to the bar too. People said he'd moved away, no one knew where. News of the disappearance faded from the papers. The Chronicle's Lost and Found column carried only a brief line, information on Eleanor Shaw, contact San Francisco Police Department, file 4715. No photo, no follow-up. For most folks, it was just one story among hundreds of trifles in the post-war era. But for Lieutenant Calloway, the case clung to him like the vinegar smell in that small room. Every so often, he'd return to Pier 70, standing alone at the end of the wooden pier, gazing out at the water. Wind from the bay blew hard, carrying the clank of anchor chains against iron posts, steady as a reminder. Below, the black water swirled, oil slicks shimmering in the sunset. He thought of the glove, the torn ID, the man who'd said he saw a black Packard leaving the pier in the fog. It all felt like scattered pieces of a picture that would never come together. A week later, the official search ended. No body, no witnesses, no confessions. The final report stated simply, insufficient grounds to establish a crime. Before closing the file, Calloway added a small note in the corner, not by regulation, just a self-reminder. No body, but something's still here. That night, as he left the precinct, fog rolled in from the bay again. The cable car's clang echoed down Powell Hill, just like the night Eleanor vanished. In his hand, the glove returned in a thin cloth bag, the only thing left of the young woman. He squeezed it lightly in his palm, feeling the cold, damp leather, then slipped it into his coat pocket. Outside, the city lit up gradually, golden lamps casting onto the fog like small fires. And amid those flickers, Eleanor Shaw's story began slipping from San Francisco's memory, sinking into the bay's shadows, where anything lost, if not found soon, would be swallowed by time forever. Summer 1949. San Francisco entered post-war reconstruction, and old stories were swept away in the influx of new people flooding the city. Eleanor Shaw's disappearance faded like the morning fog around the bay itself. Nearly 2 years since she vanished, police found no other trace. No body, no witnesses, no confession. The glove and ID card became the only remnants evoking a person who once existed. Lieutenant Calloway kept his habit of stopping by Pier 70 whenever he could. He'd lean on the rusted railing, staring at the oily water, listening to the tugboat horns echoing. Though he never said it, he knew this case had hit the limits of investigation back then. No forensic tech, no chemical analysis, everything based on statements and gut instinct. And the statements had shifted too much, slippery as fog. One afternoon, he got word from superiors. No reason to keep ES 4715 open. Lack of criminal evidence. He sat silent for a moment, then nodded. Some cases don't end. They just get buried under paperwork and dust. The small wooden evidence box was moved to the San Francisco Police Department's archives. On the lid, a faded label, Case ES 4715, missing person, suspicious circumstances. Inside the leather glove, the stiff dried ID, a few photos of room 15 shot on old film, and Calloway's handwritten note, possible blood traces on wall, unconfirmed. The archive door closed, steeped in the smell of rot wood and damp paper. The lock clicked softly, sounding like a period at the end of an unfinished story. That same year, the Sportsman's Lounge kept running, but customers thinned out. Folks, said the owner, Cristina Arroyo, planned to sell the whole place. She appeared less often, leaving staff to manage shifts. The back rooming house, once heavy with vinegar smell, stayed sealed. Whenever anyone brought up the missing girl, she'd brush it off. Old news no one remembers anymore. In 1952, the bar shut down for good. The building was bought by a small company and renovated into worker lodging for dockhands. During the work, they demolished the old back hallway and bricked over the rooming house entirely. Room 15 was sealed forever, inaccessible. Construction workers said that when they pried the door, a thick, indescribable damp smell lingered inside, like old paint mixed with vinegar. The foreman just told them to plaster thick, so no one sees what's behind. After that, the building changed hands a few more times, the old bar's name vanishing from maps. Those who'd worked there left the city or got lost in post-war migration. The paper that ran the disappearance notice yellowed in old files. In a dim corner of the SFPD archives, the small wooden box lay still, dust thick on the label, like an unmarked grave for an unburied secret. Occasionally, on late-night shifts, Calloway would gaze out the precinct window, where dim lights cast onto the fog. He'd stop thinking of room 15, but sometimes, in the rushed coffee's scent, he'd suddenly recall the acrid vinegar and dark brown streaks on the wall. He knew no one would reopen that file. Eleanor Shaw was now just a name in the unexplained missing list. And San Francisco, with its fog-shrouded streets and night sea lapping at rotted wood, swallowed another secret into its heart. Nearly 20 years later, the city had changed beyond recognition. San Francisco in the 1970s was brighter, noisier, bridges strung with traffic, and the fog seemed pierced by neon lights. In a new SFPD archives basement at the Bryant Street admin building, hundreds of old file boxes were transferred from outdated bayfront precincts. The inventory clerk was a young technician named Michael Harris, just over 30, freshly assigned from forensics. He and colleagues worked amid damp paper, dry ink, and wood dust smells, stacking boxes on head-high metal shelves. One afternoon, sorting moldy files, Harris spotted a small wooden box unlike the rest. It was heavy and sturdy, lid taped with yellowed paper. ES 47-15, missing person, suspicious circumstances. He wiped dust with his sleeve, the faded words emerging. Inside, the wax paper seal intact. Cutting the twine, old leather and rust smells wafted, mixed with a faint evaporated vinegar tang. He pulled out items, a leather glove, decayed ID, a few black and white photos of a narrow room, and a thin rusted metal bar. On the steel bar's length, a dark streak ran, dried and slightly raised on the iron. Harris tilted it under the light. The patch gleamed deep brown like dried blood. He jotted in the inventory log, steel bar, possible blood trace, untested. Later, that note was copied into the archive log, like a question mark dormant among thousands of other cases. Harris took the evidence to the tech room, asking superiors about testing. But early 1970s, SFPD had no DNA, no human protein ID gear, only basic phenolphthalein in reaction, reagent turning blood pale pink if fresh. The iron streak, dried over 2 decades, tested negative. Could be rust or paint, the lab chief said, signaling to repack. No budget, no legal basis to reopen. Noted in the file, and reseal. That afternoon, Harris added a line to the label's back. Steel bar with brown trace, possible old blood. Insufficient testing equipment. He closed the lid, resealed with fresh wax tape, and shelved it high with unclaimed cases. As he turned off the light, the room plunged dark, only door crack glow illuminating the paper label, where ES 47-15 seemed to flicker in the dust. Outside, the city buzzed with change. Skyscrapers rising in the financial district, rock nights spilling into Haight-Ashbury, and no one remembered the secretary lost in 1947 fog. The old Sportsman's Lounge building was then a small dockworker hostel, then abandoned. Room 15 lay behind thick cement walls, unknown that police had once found brown streaks inside. Occasionally, Harris thought of that steel bar. Something in its deep brown glow troubled him. Not like rust, not like paint, but like time holding a secret. He'd drafted a report proposing advanced chemical tests, but simply, no one cared. Budget for old cases gone, missing files low priority. The matter closed again, this time in absolute silence. So, amid thousands of police files, Eleanor Shaw's sank deeper under dust layers. Those who'd known her were dead or gone. The steel bar lay still in the box, topped with a new handwritten label, "Cold Storage, Case Not Active." No one recalled the vinegar smell, the brown wall streaks, or room 15 sealed behind thick plaster. Only one person, the young tech back then, would pause, glancing up at the old shelves. He didn't know why, but always felt something in that wooden box waiting to be lifted into light. And in the archive's silence, the dehumidifier's hum droned like the weary breath of cases long asleep. April 2006, North Beach was worlds away from old San Francisco. Italian cafes and wine shops nestled among century-old renovated buildings, where weathered red brick still held post-war traces. At Vallejo Street corner, a remodel began. The four-story building, once the Sportsman's Lounge, now sold to an architecture firm aiming for vintage apartments. Workers chipped thick plaster from the ground floor wall, once the bar's back rooming house. None knew room 15 lay behind, sealed over half a century. Tuesday morning, as hammers rang steady, a worker named Luis Ortega chipped at an oddly hollow brick section. Brick crumbled, dust clouded. He stopped when a small void appeared, chest-sized. Air inside exhaled damp mixed with rust. Light beaming in, a beige cloth item emerged, then fell. Luis knelt, carefully picking it, a handkerchief embroidered ES in silver thread, stitches frayed but clear. Under dust, a small decayed leather notebook with stuck edges and a rusted metal bar crossed in the wall niche. Luis handed them to the site supervisor, who immediately called police per code. When forensics arrived, the area cordoned. Captain Michael Harris, now a veteran investigator, the same who'd archived 30 years prior, was on scene. Seeing the items on white tarp, he froze. ES, silver glinting in afternoon sun, flooded memories of that wooden box. He ordered demolition halt and evidence hold. Beside the handkerchief, the leather notebook's cover torn, inside only faint stuck pages. The meter-long steel bar rusted patchy, head still bearing dark brown streak. Harris stared long, as if seeing his unfinished work from decades ago. The old building temporarily sealed. SFPD's cold case unit, officially tasked with reviewing Eleanor Shaw 1947. When young team members asked about the name, Harris said curtly, "She vanished into the fog, and we never truly found her." In the forensics lab, new evidence handled delicately. Handkerchief placed in airtight box, low heat dried. Steel bar swabbed with solution for trace extraction on rust surface. 1947 scene photos, recopied from archives, faded, sepia, but enough for Harris to recognize today's wall niche was room 15's old wall. Preliminary results returned. Harris felt a chill down his spine. Brown sample on steel bar tested positive for hemoglobin, human blood marker. Nearly 60 years passed, but truth lingered on that rusted iron. He personally signed for DNA testing. In his personal file cabinet, he still kept a hair sample from Eleanor's relatives, sent in 1998 when asked to update the missing file for National ID program. That night, leaving the lab, Harris stood at street's end, gazing at the old Sportsman's Lounge building. Bay wind blew hard, salt and fresh cement mixing. Upper windows lit golden, reflecting on peeling brick. He imagined room 15 behind the wall, where it all might have ended one 1947 night. Something kept him from leaving. Next day, as the file officially reopened, Harris wrote the first line in the report, April 12, 2006. At former Sportsman's Lounge address, construction crew discovered wall niche containing evidence matching 1947 Eleanor Shaw disappearance file. All evidence transferred to cold case unit for analysis. Official investigation restarted. Below he signed, ink trembling slightly. 30 years prior, his own hand had labeled that wooden box, cold storage, case not active. Now, that same hand brushed dust from memory. In the lit room, old evidence laid neat on table, emanating rust mixed with decayed leather and wet paper. Harris stared long, then whispered to a young colleague, "Not everything in walls dies. Some secrets just wait to be heard again." Outside, bay fog rolled into North Beach as always. But that night, city golden lights cast on the just-opened brick wall, and it felt like it finally took a deep breath after 60 years buried in silence. First lab results arrived at Cold Case Unit office on a foggy April morning. Captain Michael Harris there early, cold coffee in hand, staring at the red-sealed envelope on the glass desk. Room quiet, only AC hum and faint wind whistling hallway. Opening it, thick printed sheets slid out, first line clear. DNA test results, sample 2006-0412, KCS 47-15. Forensics confirmed, biological sample from rusted steel bar head in wall niche, matched 99.98%, with hair sample from Eleanor Shaw's direct relative, submitted by family to National ID System in 1998. 60 years, and the metal finally spoke. Harris leaned back, staring ceiling, silent long. For a moment, the room held its breath. Everything he'd suspected, vaguely felt in room 15's old vinegar smell, now solid fact by science. That afternoon, he and two tech specialists carried remaining evidence to Central Lab. Leather notebook, found with handkerchief, processed with fluorescent powder for latent prints. Under UV light, ridges gleamed like tiny waves. Tech ran comparison through AFI's, National Fingerprint Database. Under a minute, screen lit, match found, Jack Abelson. Record numbers 2416, assault 1946. The name sliced the air. Harris eyed the screen, aged eyes narrowing. The old story returning, piece by piece. Third report on chemical analysis followed. Residue on room 15 wall and steel bar contained acetic acid, vinegar's main compound, plus sodium hypochlorite traces, industrial bleach. These two, mixed right, could erase blood traces on iron and brick. Crude but effective technique, many in 1940s. Maritime trade new. Harris recalled old file detail, invoice for 2 gallons, vinegar from Martinez Supply, dated May 18, 1947, signed C. Arroyo. It all aligned, like gears idle 60 years now turning again. That evening, he went home. Reports in briefcase. Small Twin Peaks apartment glowed warm yellow, but Harris left main lights off. He sat in dimness, reopening the file. Under desk lamp, Eleanor Shaw's black and white photo sharpened, young woman with bright eyes, soft curled hair, smile just budding. He gently touched photo corner, whispering, "We finally heard you, Eleanor." Next day, Harris presented all new evidence to SFPD brass. 1947 disappearance, reclassified as homicide investigation. Small task force formed, coordinating with DA's office to reconstruct events. Press leaked news of Eleanor Shaw case. The woman vanished in San Francisco fog over half a century ago. In internal briefing, Harris told young officers, "Back then we had nothing but hunch. Now we have science, and science doesn't lie." He ordered full review of related personnel files, Jack Abelson possibly still alive, and Christina Arroyo, Sportsman's Lounge owner, both around 30 then, so over 80 if living. "Find them," he said, voice low and firm. "No one hides forever from what's in the blood." Night fell. As old Sportsman's Lounge building resealed for expanded sampling, Harris stood curbside, watching forensics enter the just-demolished wall area. Flashlights beamed on flaking brick, lime dust hazy in air. On sidewalk, embroidered ES, handkerchief in glass case awaiting transport to evidence room. A fragile fabric slept 60 years now, key unlocking a whole case. Bay wind blew cold and damp, carrying salt and rust. Harris tugged collar, eyes on now fully exposed room. 15 wall, murmuring, "We'll know what happened that night, Eleanor." No matter how late, far off tugboat horn echoed over bay, long and low like past's echo rising from fog. Days after results announced, cold case unit office air thick as April bay fog. Old files spread across tables, black and white photos, hotel registers, invoices, 1947 statements, all jumbled, faded like forgotten era's memory. Captain Michael Harris sat center, eyes fixed on photocopy of Sportsman's Lounge Hotel guest log. Eleanor S. entry, meet in May 17, 1947 register box. Beside owner's signature, C. Arroyo. Ink smudged, but slant familiar. He dug old statement, paper from years ago. Christina handwrote at police request, describing disappearance night. Right-leaning script, sharp S-tail hook characteristic. He placed both side by side, magnifying glass over, every ink stroke, pen rhythm identical. Not Eleanor's handwriting, he said softly. Voice hoarse. It's hers. Team fell silent. A young female investigator whispered, so she never checked into room 15 herself. Harris nodded. Someone used her name to plant a false trail, maybe to explain why Eleanor stayed at a hotel that night. They re-examined 1947 room 15 photo, splattered wall, empty bed, dim overhead light. Then, police thought room vacated post-guest. Now, truth emerged different. That room never rented, but place someone wanted to hide what happened. In the afternoon, Harris and his team headed to the old Franklin District Archives, where the original 1947 commercial invoices were still stored. The elderly archivist pulled a thick ledger from a wooden cabinet, its pages yellowed with age. It took them nearly an hour to find the name they were looking for. Martinez Supply Company, dealers in industrial materials and cleaning solutions. The entry on page 112 was still clearly readable. May 18, 1947, 2 gallons vinegar, 1 bottle chlorine. Buyer, Christina Arroyo. The amount was handwritten in blue ink, confirmed with her own rounded signature. In the margin of the invoice was a pencil note, delivered to the Sportsman's Lounge. Harris sat silently, staring at the paper so long the ink seemed to darken further. In his mind, the pieces fell into place. The night of May 17th, Eleanor vanished after leaving the bar. The morning of the 18th, Christina bought vinegar and chlorine. That same day, bar staff reported she ordered the carpet and curtains in room 15 replaced. And in the original report, police had noted strong vinegar smell, new carpet laid, new curtains hung. Everything fit, except that in 1947, they didn't understand vinegar and chlorine could be used to clean blood. Now, it was all clear. When Harris presented the discovery to the DA's office, the lead prosecutor asked, "Are you sure after nearly 60 years?" Harris replied calmly, "We don't have a body, but we have blood. There can't be blood on that steel bar without someone being hurt. And if someone bought chemicals right after the night she vanished, that's no coincidence." He paused, glancing out the window where fog clung to the glass. "This isn't a disappearance, it's a cleaned-up crime scene." The investigation team began reconstructing the full timeline. 9 p.m., Eleanor left home. Around 10:30 p.m., she was at the Sportsman's Lounge with Jack Abelson. Near midnight, someone heard arguing. Around midnight, sounds of metal falling and water rushing in room 15. 6 a.m., Christina called for carpet replacement. 8 a.m. she bought vinegar and chlorine. That afternoon the room was locked and sealed. 48 hours later, missing person report. Numbers once scattered now formed a continuous line, clearer than any statement. Harris pinned the timeline markers on the glass board in the briefing room, under each a photo or document, hotel ledger, invoice, report, photo of the glove, dredged from Pier 70. He stared at the wall before him, crammed with physical evidence, and felt like he was standing before a mirror reflecting the past backward. Christina Arroyo didn't just know about it, he said. She was there, and someone, maybe Jack, helped her cover it up. That evening, as everyone left the room, Harris stayed behind alone. He looked at the bar owner's scrawled handwriting on the hotel register, at the faded ink on the old invoice, and it seemed like the acrid vinegar smell from 60 years ago still lingered among the letters. The story was no longer suspicion. It had become a complete reconstruction, with every action, every wipe, every lie. Outside, San Francisco fog rolled down from Telegraph Hill again, swirling around the old rooftops. The city seemed to keep its habit of burying secrets under its thick white veil. But this time, Harris knew for sure the truth was no longer lying still behind walls. He unpinned the last photo from the board, Eleanor Shaw smiling, and wrote 3 words in capitals below. Homicide confirmed. With the timeline clearly reconstructed, Captain Michael Harris knew the only missing piece was the people. The voices that could pull the 1947 scene back to life. In the old file, the witness list had only a few legible names left, most deceased or gone from the city. He had the Civil Records Division track down addresses for 2. Charles Miller, bartender at the Sportsman's Lounge, and Frank Delgado, electrician hired to fix hallway wiring the week after the disappearance. They found Miller in a small town over 200 miles from San Francisco, in a seaside nursing home. He was 89, eyes dim but memory sharp as ever. When Harris and the young investigator entered, the old man grinned toothlessly. "You're here about the missing girl, right? I still remember that morning like it was yesterday." He recounted, voice raspy but clear, that around 8 that morning, Christina Arroyo had called him in earlier than usual. She said she wanted to clean up the back rooming house, told me to lock room 15, keep everyone out, because a troublesome guest had left in the night. I asked which guest, she just said, "Don't worry, just help lock it up." Miller paused, eyes distant. When I stepped in, the room was cold as ice. Some smell sour and sweet at once, not booze, but like bleach. I remember shivering, not knowing why. Harris showed him an old photo of the room taken later, brown splattered wall, empty bed. The old man nodded slowly. "That's it. But when I left, the curtains were replaced, new carpet down, like someone wanted to erase everything overnight." Harris asked, "Was Mrs. Arroyo there?" "Yes. She stood in the hallway, smoking, watching me lock the door. As I turned the key, she said, 'Don't ask, don't come back.' I did as told." Back then, she had pull. Everyone respected her, and was a bit scared too. Leaving the nursing home, Harris was silent the whole drive back. In his mind, the image of that woman, Christina Arroyo, came into sharper focus than ever, standing in the morning cigarette smoke of 1947, guarding a freshly sealed door where the vinegar smell still lingered. A few days later, they reached Frank Delgado, the last surviving electrician. He was living with his son in suburban Sacramento, still keeping an old work ledger. Harris opened to the May 1947 notes, seeing the faint line, "Fix hallway lights, Sportsman's Lounge, 6 a.m. Delgado recalled, "I got there early, wanted to finish before guests woke. Passing the back of the bar, I saw Jack Abelson, that young sailor who came and went, pushing a large wooden crate out to the parking lot. I asked if he needed help. He said it was shipping for the docks. The crate was old-looking, heavy, nailed along both sides. He struggled to load it onto a small truck." He paused, pouring water, then said softly, "I remember because the fog was thick then, blanketing the whole pier, but I clearly saw Mrs. Arroyo standing at the back door, arms crossed, watching the truck pull away." When asked if he was sure he wasn't mistaken, Delgado replied firmly, "No way, Jack always called me Old Wireman." The night before, he'd been drinking with me, bragging about the boss inviting him to dinner. He added that weeks later, returning to fix a fuse, he saw the rooming house walls bricked over, fresh paint, door renumbered. When I asked, Mrs. Arroyo said, "Company remodel, don't ask much," but her eyes then, like someone who'd been up all night. The 2 accounts, one from the bartender, one from the electrician, were carefully recorded on tape and transcribed. Both described the morning of May 18, 1947. Christina, ordering room 15 locked, present at the scene. At the same time, Jack hauling a heavy wooden crate toward the docks. Both clearly remembered the vinegar smell, thick fog, and the woman standing silently watching. Every piece fit, scene cleanup, hiding items, transport, all within hours after Eleanor's disappearance. As Harris reread the transcript, He felt like he was seeing that morning before his eyes, white fog blanketing the bay, truck headlights piercing through, reflecting off the mist, and the bar owner huddled in the doorway shadow, cigarette smoke curling around her head. A small wooden crate rolled away over gravel, and minutes later, it vanished into the thick fog, like a closing curtain on a dark play. That evening, Harris stood on the office balcony, looking toward the Bay Bridge. Below was Pier 70, where, per Delgado, Jack's truck had headed. "We're not just talking suspects anymore," he said to his young partner. "We're standing on the body's path." Wind blew hard from the bay, carrying salty mist and distant metallic sounds. The whole city glowed in golden lights, but in Harris's mind, everything suddenly sharpened, clear as day. Eleanor never left North Beach. She was taken away, in a wooden crate, and her final resting place was across that water, under Pier 70. The next morning, Harris and the forensics tech team returned to the old building in North Beach. What was once the sportsman's lounge was now a skeletal brick frame, all plaster stripped in the remodel. Early morning light slanted through broken window frames, casting onto the old concrete floor of the rooming house. Smells of lime dust, rust and dampness blended, making the air thick and stifling. Harris stood in the empty space that had been room 15. A place he'd only known through black and white photos for so many years. Now it stood real before him, cold and silent, like the last weary witness to the case. Forensics techs laid out marking grids, placed ground-penetrating radar on the floor. Sound waves beeped steadily, then slowed, hitting denser material. The screen showed an odd color band, darker than the rest, a rectangular streak about 6 feet long, tight against the back wall, right where the bed had once stood. Harris stared, brow furrowed. "Usual compression zone," the tech said, like something heavy lay there before more concrete was poured over. They cored 3 soil samples from the spot. The top layer was new cement, below it dark, damp earth, with a faint chlorine whiff. As the first soil plug lifted, a metallic tang wafted. One tech knelt, using tweezers to pluck tiny fibers stuck in the dirt. White threads yellowed with age, thin as from bedsheet or shirt fabric. "Cotton," he said, "common weave from the 40s. The soil and fibers were carefully bagged airtight and sent to analysis. As they continued radar scanning, 2 smaller zones appeared, parallel, one in the bathroom corner, one under the doorframe. Indicators of unevenly smashed and patched floor, new cement distinctly different. Someone had done this hastily, not to code. Harris stepped back, surveying the room, every detail, every wall patch, telling its story, a story unheard for 60 years. In the afternoon they returned with portable spectrometry gear. When purple light hit the wall near the sink, tiny specks glowed speckled, reflecting like stardust. Harris didn't need words. He knew those were bleached bloodstains. Chlorine and vinegar, with hot water, could fade color, but not erase protein traces on brick. In the quiet space, he felt like he heard the echo of running water, the sound witnesses had reported that night. Eleanor vanished. When the tech team finished, Harris lingered. He lightly touched a worn wall section, feeling the chill seep into his skin. "Here," he said softly. "She was here," no one replied. Outside the window, afternoon light slanted down, filtering through dust into a thin beam, like a thread connecting past to present. That night, in the lab, preliminary results came back. Soil from room 15 floor showed clear human protein traces. Chlorine and acetic acid appeared in unusually high ratios, proving intense cleaning. Soil also held cotton fibers and a small porcelain enamel chip, possibly from tub or bathroom wall, suspected violent site. No bones or organic tissue remained, but that was enough to prove a body had been there before removal elsewhere. Harris didn't need the conclusion report to understand. He looked at the printed results, dry numbers, but in his mind rose the foggy 1947 scene. Christina Arroyo in her black dress, bucket in hand, vinegar stench thick, and outside, Jack Abelson, waiting with the wooden crate by the lot. The room scrubbed to exhaustion, then a thin concrete layer poured over the floor, burying all. Nearly half a century passed, that concrete still lay there, cold and still, until workers chipped the wall niche in 2006. Now, with radar waves and UV light, those traces finally spoke what humans once tried to hide. Eleanor Shaw died in this room. Late night, Harris left the lab, stepping into cold wind. Far off, San Francisco Bay wore a thin fog veil, Bay Bridge lights sparkling reflected. He stood gazing long, heart heavy as that concrete floor, where a piece of the young woman's soul still lay, waiting to be brought to light. The physical forensics results closed every doubt. No longer a disappearance, but a murder concealed over half a century. When the report reached Captain Michael Harris, he glanced at the first few lines, then set it down, sighing. Everything had come time to call by its right name. The remaining issue, those once in that room if still alive, where were they? The investigation team began tracing civil records. Jack Abelson, born 1914, ex-Navy sailor, worked Hunters Point, left San Francisco after 1950. Social Security showed him in a small LA suburb bungalow, drawing military pension. Christina Arroyo, born 1906, bar owner, married once, no kids, moved to San Mateo after selling the old building in 1952. Her name still on local voter rolls, but address faded, a wooden seaside house, old-style vine-covered walls. Both alive, both over 80. 60 years passed, but the thread between them seemed unbroken. Harris went to San Mateo personally, first. Christina's house hid among quiet streets, gray wood fence, windows shuttered. When he and the agent knocked, it took nearly 5 minutes for the bolt to draw inside. The old woman appeared, small-framed, snow-white hair, wrapped in thick sweater. She eyed him a moment, then said softly, "I knew this day would come." Her voice still held that distinctive low timbre. Harris said nothing, just handed the search warrant. Christina pursed her lips, nodded, then turned silently inside. The house smelled of old dust and rotted wood. Living room walls hung with black and white photos, her younger years standing beside a man in Navy uniform, Jack Abelson. In a small desk drawer by the armchair, they found a rusted tin box. Inside, clipped among letters, was a thin paper, written in faded blue ink, "Stay quiet. Everything's still in the walls, no one will find it, as long as you don't talk." Signed, J. Right-leaning script, elongated J tail, matched Jack Abelson's old file signature perfectly. Harris held the paper in gloved hand, staring long. He asked, "Do you know what this letter means?" Christina didn't answer, just gazed out the window where sea wind gently stirred thin curtains. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, another team approached Jack's small house. The 82-year-old man opened the door limping, eyes still sharp, but voice gravelly. Seeing the badge, he just said, "I figured the old stuff surfaced." Breakfast cereal bowl half-eaten on the table, TV muted on news. They read the arrest warrant. He didn't resist, just asked, "What about her?" "Christina Arroyo, being arrested right now," the agent replied. Jack bowed his head, aged shoulders trembling slightly, unclear if shiver or bitter laugh. News of the two ancient suspects arrested spread fast through San Francisco PD. It was their coldest case reopened with the most surprising outcome: the last two witnesses still alive. When Harris got the call that Jack was cuffed and loaded into a car, he stood still gazing at the paper in hand, the 1948 letter. 60 decades, and finally, those words led them back to the beginning. Afternoon of November 9th, 2006, at San Francisco Airport, two prisoner vans rolled in parallel, one from Los Angeles, one from San Mateo. As the doors opened, Harris saw them, Jack Abelson and Christina Arroyo, stepping down, two frail bodies, but still holding old forms. He tall, thin, she short, black eyes, still deep set. They glanced at each other briefly, a look short as a memory revived. Then both separated, led to separate interrogation rooms. On the drive back, Harris watched the city slide past the car window. Bay Bridge hazy in fog, white steel towers gleaming in afternoon light. He recalled the chlorine smell in room 15, rust on the steel bar, the image of the wooden crate rolling across the lot that morning. All that was once rumor, once suspicion, now real people, real deeds, sitting just walls away. As the car turned into SFPD interrogation wing, he heard himself murmur, "We came full circle, Eleanor. Now it's time they talk." And far off, San Francisco still wore its thick fog layer, like it knew, after nearly 60 years silent, the secrets buried in walls finally had to face the light. In the stark white interrogation room, Christina Arroyo sat still, thin gnarled hands clasped, nails dark red polish, but trembling faintly. Before her, untouched water glass, cold steam rising thin. Harris sat across, file open, black and white photos lined, room 15, rusted steel bar, embroidered ES handkerchief, and finally, the 1947 vinegar invoice. He slid the photo toward her. "You bought these, right?" Christina glanced, then turned away, voice hoarse. "Too long ago, I don't remember." Harris didn't reply, just pulled from a small envelope the paper found in her desk drawer, slanted script. "Stay quiet. Everything's still in the walls." As he placed it on the table, the room air froze. Christina inhaled deep, lips tight, then exhaled long. "I didn't kill her," she said, so softly it was nearly breath. "But I cleaned the blood. I cleared the room." Harris didn't look away. Why clean if nothing happened? She fell silent, then whispered, "I was scared." Jack lost control. They argued. I heard thuds, then a scream. When I ran in, she was limp, head smashed against the bed frame. Jack said he'd handle it. I just helped him. Her voice rasped, dry as old paper. "I cleaned because he begged, because I thought it was an accident." Harris leaned in, voice low. "You bought vinegar and chlorine the next morning. You knew what for. You knew you were wiping the scene." Christina closed her eyes, tears tracing deep cheek wrinkles. "I knew," she said, "but I didn't dare stand against him. Jack wasn't just drunk. He could have killed me too." In the next room, Jack Abelson sat across from the young investigator. He was silent, arms crossed over chest, cloudy eyes staring into space. When the investigator read Christina's statement, Jack just gave a thin smile. "Of course she says that. Her whole life, that's her, always wanting clean hands." The investigator asked, "So you deny it all?" Jack replied slowly, "I didn't kill her, I just hit her because she lied to me." Then silence. Harris entered. He didn't sit right away, but stood behind Jack, placing before him the room 15 photo, blood splatters under UV light. "You say just hit, but blood sprayed 4 ways. Forensics calculated impact force, heavy object head, 35-degree attack angle from front. You're right-handed. All matches your height and stance. This wasn't defensive, it was fatal." Jack bowed his head, hands clenched, veins bulging on neck. "I didn't mean to kill her," he rasped. "I just wanted her quiet." Harris sat across, gaze unwavering. "Quiet about what, Jack?" He fell silent. 1 minute, then 2. Finally, Jack sighed, voice dropping like blending into the AC hum. "She said she'd leave me, that she'd tell Christina everything, that I was using both. I got mad. I remember grabbing the cane, then after, just blood." "What then?" Her Christina ran in, screamed. "I told her no cops. She helped clean, got water, vinegar, rags. I said I'd take the body elsewhere." He looked up, eyes cloudy but unaverted. "I buried her right under that room floor, then near dawn, hauled her out." The air in the room thickened, Harris said softly. "Taken where?" Jack replied, his voice almost a whisper. "Pier 70. I had a small truck. I worked there, knew the empty warehouse area near the dock. I buried her temporarily in a broken concrete pit behind the workshop." He paused, inhaling deeply, then continued, "I thought the tide would wash it all away." Outside, San Francisco fog had begun seeping through the glass. Harris looked at the old man before him, his face wrinkled weary, and understood that after 60 years, the guilt hadn't faded at all. He asked the final question, "Why stay silent for so long?" Jack looked up, his gaze empty. "Because no one asked. Because I wanted to believe it never happened." Harris stood, signaling the end of the interrogation. In the next room, Christina was being given heart medication by a nurse. She saw him, trying a weak smile. "I've told everything," she whispered. "Now I just want her found." Harris nodded. "We will find her," he replied. That night he drove to Pier 70, wind gusting from the bay, cold and metallic smelling. The old pier now abandoned, warehouses leaning, wooden planks creaking. He stopped, gazing at the row of old piers sunk in darkness, listening to the gentle waves lapping. Jack's confession echoed in his head. A broken concrete pit behind the workshop. Harris stepped out of the car, flashlight beams sweeping over the uneven concrete, through the jagged cracks. A gust whistled through the iron door gap, bone-chilling, like the last breath of the past jolting awake after 60 years of slumber. He knew that in the morning, people would return here, this time not just to search for traces, but to recover the very remains of the girl, buried with an entire era's secrets. And for the first time in many years on the job, Harris felt his heart heavy, as if Eleanor Shaw herself had led him, showing him where to go. Pier 70 still stood there, silent and waiting. Dawn cast a silvery gray over San Francisco Bay as the police convoy entered the abandoned Pier 70 harbor area. Early mist from the water crept up, swallowing the row of rusted warehouses huddled together, their corrugated roofs warped and reflecting the cold light of an autumn morning. Jack Abelson sat in the back of the first car, hands cuffed, eyes quietly gazing through the fogged window. He was frail with age, but in those cloudy eyes lingered something stubborn, as if he would only believe when he saw the place himself where everything had once ended. Harris waited outside, bay wind tugging lightly at his coat flap. He watched the car stop, 2 officers helping Jack out. The 82-year-old man's steps trembled, but he tried to straighten his back. "You remember?" Harris asked, voice low. Jack nodded slowly. "I remember every inch of ground here," he said softly. "We worked night shifts." She lay behind Workshop 3. The forensics team brought radar equipment and specialized shovels. They followed the cracked concrete path, weeds pushing through cement gaps, to the back of the old warehouse marked Warehouse 3. The spot Jack indicated. There, the concrete floor dipped slightly, a section flaked off, the joint against the back wall, a hastily mixed patch of old earth. Harris knelt, touching the mottled soil, the damp, salty scent of bay mud mixed with rust vapor. "Here?" he asked. Jack nodded, eyes fixed on the ground. "I dug the hole here, shallow, then poured concrete over, thinking the tide would handle the rest." The exhumation order was issued immediately. 2 technicians began prying up the thin concrete layer with shovels, chunks breaking to reveal black soil beneath. After a few minutes, a musty scent of long-buried earth wafted up. They worked in silence, only the clink of metal on stone and wind threading through rusted steel frames. When the soil reached about a meter deep, one of the workers paused. "There's something here," he called loudly. Harris approached, seeing a creamy white object emerging in the damp earth, the slender curve of a human forearm bone. Everyone stopped for a few seconds, no one speaking. Harris knelt, feeling the bay wind cold on his neck. "Keep going," he signaled. Layers of soil were scraped aside, and then the rest of the skeleton emerged, lying on its side, naturally contracted, as if the woman were still trying to hold herself. Amid the wet dirt and gravel bits, a small silver gleam flashed at the wrist. A technician used tweezers to extract it, rinsing gently with distilled water. It was a thin silver bracelet, inside engraved, E.S. No one said anything more, only the gentle waves lapping at the wooden pier and a distant tugboat horn. Jack saw the jewelry, his whole body trembling slightly. He sank to his knees, cuffed hands, trying to rise to cover his face. "I thought the water would take her," he whispered, but she stayed. That afternoon, as the skeleton was fully collected and bagged sealed, Harris stood alone by the pit. The smells of earth, iron, and salt blended into a thick, familiar to the point of terrifying air. He knelt, placing a hand on the broken concrete edge. "We found you, Eleanor," he said softly. Behind him, police car blue and red lights cast onto the fog, smearing like dim fire. 2 days later, DNA results arrived. The bone sample from Pier 70 matched Eleanor Shaw's hair sample perfectly. After nearly 60 years, what was once fog-shrouded rumor became irrefutable evidence. The press reported 1947 office workers' remains found after 59 years. Local papers printed the silver bracelet photo and an old smiling shot of Eleanor, the bottom headline reading, "Justice though late arrives." When the news reached the precinct, Harris stared at the report line in long silence. In his memory, the image of the young woman stepping out of her Powell Street apartment into the foggy night sharpened like an old film scene. Light footsteps, door closing, then gone. Now she was found, no longer a shadow among file pages. In her cell, upon hearing the news, Christina broke down crying. She said, "Only one thing. Horse. Finally, she's coming home." As for Jack, when informed of the results, he just looked up and asked, "Will they bury her somewhere with sunlight?" No one answered. Outside, San Francisco afternoon was quiet. Fog lifted gradually from the bay, revealing faint rays reflecting from the Bay Bridge, and at Pier 70, the concrete pit had been refilled, smooth as if nothing had ever been hidden beneath. But the difference was, this time, people weren't burying a secret anymore, but laying down a found truth, as if the city itself finally sighed in relief, after 60 years carrying a forgotten name. The 6 a.m. news bulletin on December 15, 2006, made all of San Francisco pause for a few seconds. On screen, the San Francisco District Attorney stated briefly, "After nearly 6 decades of intermittent investigation, the California Attorney General's office officially charges 2 suspects in the 1947 Eleanor Shaw case, Jack Abelson, second-degree murder. Christina Arroyo, accomplice in concealment and destruction of evidence." The female anchor continued, "A case thought buried with time, now revived by DNA technology and hands that never gave up." Captain Michael Harris watched the press conference from the back row, thick file in hand. At the podium, the DA's representative presented the evidence chain neatly arranged like a timeline map. DNA from the steel bar and bones found at Pier 70, matching Eleanor Shaw, Jack's fingerprints on the decayed leather notebook, the 1948 handwritten letter in his script, plus a series of photos and chemical analyses, proving the scene cleanup with vinegar and bleach. In the projection slide, the silver bracelet engraved ES appeared center screen, light glinting sparkling, like final proof. When the lead prosecutor read the conclusion, investigators confirm after 59 years, Eleanor Shaw's body has been found, and justice finally has a face. The room fell utterly silent. Harris bowed his head. In that moment, he no longer heard camera flashes or buzzing chatter. Only the image of the woman from back then, bright eyes amid Powell Street fog, rose in his memory, clear as if standing right before him. At the California Attorney General's office, indictment drafting took 2 straight days. Jack Abelson was charged with second-degree murder under California Penal Code Section 187, with the aggravating factor inflicting serious injury resulting in death. Christina Arroyo faced charges of accessory after the fact, destruction of evidence, and obstruction of justice. The indictment spanned over 40 pages, with more than 100 appendix pages of evidence files, forensic photos, and witness statements. That afternoon, as police escorted the 2 suspects to San Francisco Superior Court for preliminary hearing, dozens of reporters waited outside the grounds. Jack stepped slowly from the car, head bowed, wrists trembling in steel cuffs. Christina followed, face ashen, lips pressed tight. Lenses flashed wildly. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Do you regret it, Christina?" She looked up briefly, deep black eyes, replying only, "It's all too late now." In the closed conference room, Harris sat with the investigation team as the prosecutor summarized the case. Physical evidence is the victim's bones, DNA match. Steel bar found in the wall contains Eleanor Shaw's blood. Notebook has Jack Abelson's fingerprints. 1948 letter proves the connection and agreement to stay silent between the two suspects. Both present at the scene, then jointly cleaned, disposed of the body. Each sentence hammered another nail into the past's door. When reaching the evidence description, the prosecutor emphasized chlorine and vinegar compounds identified in room 15 soil samples match the common blood cleaning technique of that era. Chemical purchase confirmed by invoice in Arroyo's name, dated May 18, 47. This is direct evidence of concealment. The room fell absolutely silent. Harris glanced at the clock, the second hand at 12, the same moment 60 years prior when Eleanor left her apartment and never returned. At the end, the DA's representative declared to the press, 59 years we waited for an answer. Today that answer arrived. No one escapes justice forever, not even time. Outside the courthouse, residents gathered under thin fog. Some brought flowers, others held old photos of Eleanor clipped from 1947 papers. An elderly woman, teary-eyed, told a reporter, "I was little when it happened. Who'd think we'd hear her name again now?" That evening, Harris returned to the office, desk lamp casting on his tired face. He opened the file one last time, gazing at the printed cover line, Case Number ES-47. 15. Homicide Investigation. Reopened 2006. Below, he handwrote a small addition. Found. Body. Weapon. Truth. He closed the file, feeling like closing an entire chapter of this city. A chapter opened in 1947 fog, and only just shut by the cold white lab lights of 2006. Outside the glass window, bay wind blew again, carrying a long tugboat horn. Harris stood, murmuring to himself. "Eleanor, finally they called your name in the light, not in the shadows anymore." And somewhere in the heart of a city that had buried too many secrets, San Francisco seemed to exhale long, as if it too had been freed after 59 years of silence. Courtroom, Number 3 of the San Francisco Superior Court. Winter morning, 2006. Dim light filtered through tall windows, casting on the two defendant benches. Left, Jack Abelson. Silver hair, wrinkled face, thin frame, but eyes still sharply cold. Right, Christina Arroyo, slightly hunched back, lips pressed tight. 60 years passed. The two, who once hid a bloody night, now sat in the same frame, facing justice. The district prosecutor opened briefly. "Today, you will hear a story that began in 1947, buried under Pier 70's concrete and exhumed by science. A woman, beaten, buried, forgotten, and now, her truth finally returns." Then, turning to the jury, he began presenting the evidence. The first slide showed the steel bar found in the wall niche. Beside it, the DNA results. Blood sample matching 99.98%, with Eleanor Shaw's direct relative. Next, the decayed leather notebook where Jack Abelson's fingerprints were found. The 1948 handwritten letter with "Stay quiet." Everything still in the walls. Script matching his signature perfectly. Forensics experts simulated the scene. 35-degree attack angle, strong frontal impact force, blood spatter matching Jack's height, proving direct assault, not a fall or accidental scuffle. The prosecutor showed another slide. Room 15 floor under UV light. Hundreds of fluorescent specks, showing bleached blood traces. Chemical report confirmed acetic acid and sodium hypochlorite presence. "This isn't accident signs," he said, voice firm and cold. "This is scene cleanup." The first witness, former bartender Charles Miller, took the stand with a cane. He recounted that the morning after Eleanor's disappearance, Christina called him in early, told him to lock room 15, and don't ask. He still clearly remembered the sour, bleach-like acrid smell. Next, Electrician Frank Delgado, described seeing Jack pushing a heavy wooden crate to the parking lot at dawn that day. Christina standing at the back door, smoking and watching. Both accounts matched perfectly the timeline the cold case team reconstructed. After witnesses, Captain Michael Harris took the stand. He stood calmly, but each word heavy. We had no miracles, just persistence and science. DNA, fingerprints, chemicals, witnesses, all point to one place, room 15, night of May 17, 1947. There, Eleanor Shaw was beaten, cleaned up, then taken away. The courtroom silent enough to hear the clerk's paper rustle. For the defense, Jack's lawyer chose the only arguable line, no intent to kill. This was a drunken scuffle, a tragic accident my client carried on his shoulders for 60 years. They blurred intent with emotion, citing age, time, and possible scientific errors accumulating over decades. Christina's lawyer clung to similar, she killed no one, just cleaned in panic. Seeing the body, she was coerced to help Jack. She had no motive. The defenses sounded feeble in the room full of images, steel bar, blood streaks, silver bracelet, vinegar and bleach invoice. The prosecutor rebutted decisively, vinegar, blood cleanup, body hiding, that's no accident. Accidents don't lead to digging holes, pouring concrete, and writing silence letters. He paused, then pointed to the photo of the engraved silver bracelet found on the skeleton wrist at Pier 70. Accidents don't take a dead woman's jewelry to the grave. When allowed to speak, Jack rose. He gripped the table edge trembling, voice gravelly. I didn't mean to kill her, I just wanted her to stop talking. Just one swing. Then I saw blood. Christina screamed. I said I'd handle it. I was scared. He bowed his head, shoulders slumping. Christina, voice weaker. I cleaned out of fear. I didn't touch the cane, I just wanted it all gone. The judge allowed the jury to retire to deliberations. 12 men and women sat hours in silence. Before them, timeline map, statements, evidence photos, everything meshed like a cold machine. When returning to court, no words, just wooden chair creaks. The court clerk stood, reading the verdict. Defendant Jack Abelson, guilty of second-degree murder. Defendant Christina Arroyo, guilty of accessory after the fact. No cheers, no sighs of relief, only the rustle of judgment paper and lights beaming down on two silver heads like old stones. Jack sat motionless. Christina wept softly, tears falling, but unwiped. Harris in the back row closed his eyes, feeling both serene and heavy. Justice had come, but no one young remained to witness it. Sentencing occurred a week later. Defense lawyers pleaded leniency. Age, time, and remorse have been punishment. But the prosecution stood firm. Time doesn't erase crime. It only prolongs the dead's solitude. The judge sat straight, voice steady. Defendant Jack Abelson is sentenced to life imprisonment for second-degree murder. Defendant Christina Arroyo is sentenced to 20 years incarceration for concealment, tampering, and obstruction of justice. The gavel fell, dry echo resounding off old wooden ceiling. A history page closed, 60 years after Eleanor Shaw's final scream. Outside the courthouse, afternoon fog rolled in from the bay, veiling the wet, cold steps. Someone placed a white flower branch beside the old 1947 newspaper-clipped photo, the young woman's smile vanishing into mist. When a reporter asked Harris, "Captain, what do you think after 59 years?" He paused, gazing toward the fog-shrouded Bay Bridge, then replied softly, "Justice isn't punctual, but it always arrives." Bay wind blew hard, carrying a long, mournful tugboat horn. San Francisco seemed to bow its head slightly, bidding farewell to a soul finally named, and an old secret returned to light. When the verdict was announced, San Francisco seemed to hold its breath. 60 years of silence ended with 2 cold gavel strikes, and news of the Eleanor Shaw case spread across America in one night. From morning broadcast to weekend magazines, the name "The Fog City Cold Case Solved" blanketed front pages. The San Francisco Chronicle ran a huge headline, "SFPD's coldest case finally cracked. Justice for the girl vanished in 1947. Fog." Images of the ES engraved silver bracelet and Eleanor's old smiling photo, printed everywhere, like symbols of a city that once buried pain in thick mist. On forums, residents shared parents' and grandparents' memories from North Beach life. Some recalled rumors of the girl missing from the seaside bar. Others said they'd avoided that row house because of the strange vinegar smell they'd never forget. A 70-year-old woman wrote in a letter to the editor, "I was 6 when it happened. My mom worked at the bar next door. She said some night she heard crying mixed in the wind. Now I understand, it was probably her spirit." At San Francisco Police Department, hallways hung thick with case images, Pier 70 map, Room 15 photos, and handwritten sign ES 4715. Justice served. Captain Michael Harris became the name mentioned in every meeting. When reporters asked his feelings after 59 years, he just said, "I didn't crack this case, time and truth did. I just listened." A month after trial, a small memorial was held at Pier 70, right where Eleanor's body was found. That morning, fog so thick the bay water appeared only as a hazy old mirror. On the refilled concrete, police erected a small stone plaque engraved Eleanor M. Shaw, 1916-1947, found at last. May the city remember. Few attended, a few officers, Eleanor's remaining relatives, a group of police cadets, and locals from around the docks. Harris stood in the back row, white flowers in hand. As the priest read the prayer, he gazed at the bay, where first light pierced the fog, reflecting on the water like 1,000 mirror shards. Salt, smell, wind, and seagull wings blended, creating a feeling both peaceful and poignant. A young officer stepped up to speak, voice trembling but clear. "I was born when this case was so old, no one mentioned it, but I understand that in this city, no case is truly cold. The coldest file isn't a file, it's the city's memory. And every time someone reopens an old folder, they're reviving that memory, so it doesn't get swallowed by the fog." The words silenced the crowd. Some bowed heads, some touched the plaque, as if apologizing. After the memorial, Harris walked the pier length. Wind flipped his coat flap, scattering white petals onto the water. They swirled, then drifted to the pier base, exactly where 60 years prior, a man once tossed a wooden crate. He watched, aged eyes blurring slightly. In the fog, it felt like someone stood distant, slender figure in a light coat, nodding thanks softly. That afternoon, local TV aired a special report, opening with San Francisco sunk in fog. A female narrator's voice rose, "In a city where mist veils the past, sometimes it takes half a century to find a forgotten soul." The report replayed 2006 investigators chipping walls, finding the steel bar, embroidered, ES, handkerchief, intercut with trial footage, jury reading verdict. Ending, the narrator said. Justice may arrive late, but when it does, it lights an entire city. On social media, many wrote that the Eleanor Shaw case made them rethink late justice. A young SFPD officer commented under an article, "This case makes me believe police duty isn't closing the past, but keeping memory alive long enough to speak." The quote shared thousands of times, quoted in many editorials. Harris retired soon after. Before leaving the precinct, he returned to the old file room, where the wooden box labeled ES 47, 15 inches once lay dust-covered. Now it sat in a glass case, beside a photo of the silver bracelet and small inscription, "Closed case. Solved 2006. He touched the glass, whispering, "We found you, Eleanor." And this city found a piece of itself too. Outside, afternoon fog descended again. From the bay, a tugboat horn sounded long and low, mingling with gentle waves. In the lamps flickering through mist, the city seemed to breathe easy, as if the 60-year burden finally laid down. A young reporter who'd followed the case ended her article with lines that brought tears to many. "In this city, some souls can't rest until truth is revealed." The truth about Eleanor Shaw didn't just close a case, but reopened San Francisco's heart, where every fog droplet carries memory of someone once forgotten. And as night fell on Pier 70, Bay Bridge lights reflected on the water, sparkling like hundreds of tiny flames. Amid that mist, it felt like a slender, hazy figure walked away, leaving behind the city, now more at peace, because finally, truth had been named. The Eleanor Shaw story reminds us that justice in America today relies not just on caught-in-the-act moments, but on persistence, archiving, and communities that speak up. If a 1947 night in room 15 inches could be wiped clean with vinegar and bleach, then intimate partner violence today can be hidden with just a scuffle. Excuses. First lesson: value early signals and document details. Store evidence safely, photos, messages, timelines. Proactively call 988 900 Elevenths lines when needed. And don't dismiss modern vinegar and bleach, smells, unusual signs around loved ones, neighbors. Second lesson: technology plus community memory drive breakthroughs. The 1998 relative hair sample matched DNA in 2006, without family cooperation, without Captain Michael Harris's persistence reopening the file, without North Beach renovation workers reporting the wall niche, Pier 70 wouldn't have revealed the ES silver bracelet. Update missing persons DNA files in national databases as tech always advances. Third lesson: urban memory is a safety infrastructure. The young officer's words, "The coldest file is the city's memory," remind us to join neighborhood watches, PTA groups, churches, where rumors transform into accountable leads. Finally, don't let shame silence you. Eleanor left home to meet someone for the last time and never returned. Our speaking up today could shorten 59 years of waiting for another family. If you believe every truth, no matter how long buried, deserves to be found, hit subscribe to join us in continuing the journey reopening America's cold cases. Thank you for following the Eleanor Shaw story. See you in the next episode, where another Fog City secret will be revealed amid San Francisco's mist.